So to tell you just a little bit more about Jane Cramer. She's been at the University of Oregon since 2000 in the political science department. Her research interests have included examining the process of national strategic threat assessment and the sources of intentional threat inflation. She also studies U.S. interventions in developing states, focusing on understanding diversionary wars, interventions done for domestic political reasons more than strategic reasons. And she's currently examining U.S. nuclear modernization and the emerging reversal of arms control successes. She's doing a project on the nuclear taboo with a grad student and another on the North Korea threat and U.S. missile defenses. I'll give you Jane Cramer. She has a mic, I think.
Is it on? Is it on? Yep. Yes, so I am Jane Cramer, and I study all those things, mostly because I do international security, war and peace stuff. And I started in this in the 80s, working on arms control and nuclear weapons. And I was hopeful then that this was by the time I finished grad school, I was hopeful that we were done with that issue. And that because the Cold War ended while I was in graduate school. And so I went on to do some other things. But now this is back with a vengeance. And you are going to see me as a alarmist here tonight, and I don't mean to be. I'm trying to not be alarmed. But I am alarmed, and I'm going to spend a bit of time explaining the depth and seriousness of the alarm in the community of experts that I pay attention to and do research with. And I will just say John Valdez is the grad student who's working on a nuclear taboo project with me. And I think he's getting alarmed, and we're all alarmed. So I've been working on a bunch more nuclear issues lately because it's come back, and it's very upsetting. So last fall, I taught, one of my classes was called Terrorism and Weapons of Mass Destruction Proliferation. And throughout the term, I couldn't keep control of the class. I got so alarmed. And meaning it just every day something would happen that we'd have to address that was upsetting. And now I'm even beyond that. Even after that semester, I looked back at it today and yesterday and said, wow, it's getting worse by the minute. So, so if any of you get The Economist, I saw today an article in The Economist that was sort of the inside scoop of how the Trump administration is talking about nuclear war with North Korea. And I'm going to show you some of that here, but I urge you to read that in case I forget to mention it. It's really, really interesting. They are thinking about it. I want to point out today, because of this, the Doomsday Clock. Does anybody remember the Doomsday Clock? Yeah. There you go, from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists is a journal that was started by a bunch of physicists who invented the nuclear bomb and then had regrets. And some of those people were the type of people who taught me in security studies. A bunch of them led stuff at the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And we pay very much attention to the nuclear clock. And so in '53, it was very close to midnight, as in Doomsday midnight. And then at the end of the Cold War, they pushed the hands way back. And everybody thought this game was going to be over. We thought we had finally learned, right, that nobody wins a nuclear war. And so it became stupid. And so both sides disarmed unbelievably. They went from 35,000 weapons down to today. Russia and the US each have 1,500 deployed, really 5,000 to 8,000 in storage. But still, that's way fewer than 35,000 each, right? And you need 400 to destroy another large country, okay? But by 2017, the hands were pushing up and up and up because of talk with North Korea. And today, they moved even closer, okay? So it's stunning everybody. And when I finished my class in December, experts were all on the road saying we have a 50% chance of nuclear war this month, 50% chance. That means today, maybe, tomorrow, maybe, keep flipping the coin, right? That's how close they think it is. And so this is very real and very unfortunate, and I'm going to try to explain how we got here. As we know, I'm sorry I made this so busy, but we're in a war of words between Trump and Kim Jong Un. And some of the words are more important than the other words. So I've highlighted for you some of Trump's most important words. They've called each other Rocket Man and Rogue and Demented and Little Man and, short and fat and all kinds of silly stuff that is awful. But Trump said very seriously very clearly in 2016 that he would get China to make Kim Jong Un disappear in one form or another very quickly. Now, this is what Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, fears the most, is that the U.S. is really interested in regime change, that we're going to take him out somehow. So it's not that we want a war, but that we're going to somehow sneakily or surgically or something take him out. And he has very real reasons to fear this, as probably most of you realize, because we took out Saddam Hussein, and Gaddafi, who gave up his nuclear weapons, was later removed. Kim Jong Un is actually very obsessed that he's not going to suffer the fate of Saddam and Gaddafi. Okay, and he says this repeatedly. Got it? In August 2017, I'm sure we all remember this, North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. And he doubled down on that when people asked him about it over the next days, fire and fury. He said, if anything, maybe that statement wasn't tough enough. Okay? In September, in a speech to the UN General Assembly, Trump warned the U.S. that the U.S. would totally destroy North Korea if forced to defend itself or its allies. So it sounds defensive, right? He said, while the U.S. has great strength and patience, its options could soon run out. Directly putting the country's leaders on notice, Trump suggested Kim Jong Un could not survive an American attack. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself. And at one point, he seemed to be defining that we're going to defend ourselves if they attack first. But most often, he defines our defense as if they threaten us with nuclear weapons and missiles. Now, what does that mean? If they build nuclear weapons and missiles, right? That's a threat. Does he have to use them? No, he was threatening us repeatedly. So Kim Jong Un is not a good, stable guy either, as I hope we all realize. He's made videotapes of launching his nuclear weapons at Washington, D.C. and played them for his people repeatedly, right? And he's made many, many threats at the U.S. He is not, I don't think he's unstable. I think he might even be more rational than some other people in this context. I don't know. I think he understands the situation extremely well, let's put it that way. And I'm not sure Trump does understand it extremely well. And I'll explain. He understands some of it, but I'll tell you what he doesn't understand, or at least he hasn't shown that he understood it, is missile defense. And that's a problem, okay? That's the biggest problem. Trump has a bargaining point. Making a good deal does require being tough in some people's minds. So I'm not saying there's not a potential strategy here. There could be, and we're going to talk about that. It's just a dangerous strategy. It's a very risky strategy when you're dealing with somebody else who's very scared and claims he's going to preempt us if we attempt regime change, and anything can look like regime change, okay? So the biggest problem is if Kim Jong Un thinks he's being attacked, then he's prepared his people for this, he will do an all-out attack, and he's got a lot. We are downplaying what he's got. The CIA estimates he has 60, there's the telephone we need, you know. Can you believe this thing? Hello. Yeah, it's so old-fashioned. I don't think my daughter's seen a cord. Anyway, but Kim Jong Un is a paranoid person who is very unstable. So it's a very risky situation. Kim has, as I've said, he said horrible things back at Trump. He's accused Trump of being mentally deranged. This was the funniest one. Action is the best option in treating the dotard, right? This old British term. Hard of hearing is utter. Anyway, very, as juvenile as anybody, right? And just on January 2nd, the most recent sort of big one, these are just months old, but Donald Trump said Kim Jong Un just stated that the nuclear button is on his desk at all times. Will someone from his depleted and food-starved regime please inform him that I too have a nuclear button, but it is much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works? All right, this is a very, very frightening war of words. So how dangerous? I'm sorry to bore you with these quotes, but the problem is that these are very real things. It's been likened repeatedly over and over again to the Cuban Missile Crisis because that's what it feels like. It's been called the Cuban Missile Crisis in slow motion because the Cuban Missile Crisis lasted 13 days and we've been at this for months, right? So Khrushchev and Kennedy, there's an incredibly good article by a leading scholar named Scott Sagan in Foreign Affairs that goes through a lot of these points on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Really good article, so if you look back at that, it's one of the best. But one thing Sagan points out, and others have pointed out, both Khrushchev and Kennedy were scared. And I think Kim Jong Un is scared. I don't think Trump is scared because I think he holds all the cards, and that makes it riskier. I haven't seen him seem scared. I think Tillerson is scared. I think Tillerson is trying to pull it back the most. And others were, but only Tillerson right now. But Khrushchev, very famously, toward the end of the 13 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis, wrote to Kennedy about how close they were to having an accidental nuclear war. Because Castro, in the middle of it in Cuba, was very willing to have a nuclear war, which is a lot how Kim Jong Un is seeming. Castro felt so threatened, he kept saying, fine, launch it and we'll just die for the cause. And that's the type of thing Kim Jong Un is saying. He's telling his people, be prepared to die in the millions for the cause. Be prepared, and they're doing drills to practice it. And his leaders are constantly saying things like, we are really prepared just to die for the cause. And they're like absolutely preparing themselves to die in the millions because they think they're going to be attacked, okay? Khrushchev wrote to Kennedy, it is not a fact that an intruding, is it not a fact that an intruding American plane could easily be taken for a nuclear bomber which might push us to the fateful step, right? There was an intruding American plane, if you remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was taken wrongly, and Khrushchev held it back, okay? So he was in real time saying, uh-oh, I just pulled this back. And then historians got together much later and saw all the ways that the leaders had no idea how close they got, right? And McNamara, not a good guy in some other situations, but in this situation, held back nuclear war in several different times, several that he knew about and several he didn't know about until later, which is fascinating to study. But if you want to be scared, look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there's lots of good studies out there now. And the National Security Archive is putting out a whole bunch more reflections on the Cuban Missile Crisis for this reason, to reflect on it right now. So if you stuff, you can just Google. They're sending it out to your mailbox if you want to look at it. Anyway, Sagan walked us through a number of these things. Would Seoul, the capital of South Korea, see a movement of Pyongyang, as the capital of North Korea's nuclear missiles out of the caves in which they are stored as a drill, a defensive precaution, or the start of an attack, right? So it is highly likely Kim Jong Un might move some of his missiles out of some of his caves at some point, right? And now how would South Korea see this? Or the US? We could be very tempted, as many people have called for in op-eds in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, take them out before they fire. Don't rely on missile defense because it doesn't work. And so if they pull them out of the caves, shoot them down. And then what happens, right? If you shoot them before they launch, which is a preemptive strike, right? This is what we say we're going to do, right? Then they fire back. Right? They are completely poised to fire on South Korea a lot, but they have also promised that they are ready to hit us, just to be clear, and they can, right? Yes, they just now built an ICBM, but do you think that the world's best smuggler of weapons needs to rely on a missile to deliver a nuclear bomb? Marijuana dealers send bales of marijuana into the USA every day. North Korea is far more clever than your average marijuana smuggler, just so you know. They have been smuggling weapons all over the world for their money. They're incredibly good at it. They sell missiles all over the world for their exchange. I mean, they're bad guys. I am not trying to say they're good guys. I am saying but we sell missiles too, so, to be fair, but they're doing it from our perspective illegally, right? Anyway, but so since it's illegal, they have to smuggle them. They're very good at it. They smuggle weapons all over the place. They can, and they've hinted, but they don't want to directly threaten us because if they do, they're afraid they're going to be punished. They have hinted that fire and fury will be met with fire and fury. In the USA, you are not untouchable, things like that. Anyway, so these are a number of ways. An ill-timed inflammatory tweet could provoke a response from Kim if he thinks something's coming, right? North Korea, as of 2017, got into the high-ready mode to be poised for preemptively attack in self-defense. Starting in April 2016, in response to the U.S.-South Korea military exercises, North Korea state media reported the Revolutionary Armed Forces of North Korea decided to take preemptive attack as the mode of its military counteraction. The right to nuclear preemptive attack is by no means a U.S. monopoly. And they have increased that readiness ever since 2016. They are ready for preemptive attack. What does that mean? If they think they're being attacked, they will attack first. Preemption is to go first in the face of an attack. Okay, so if you're ready to go first and you think you only have seconds to decide, because the time frame in which we could take them out is minutes, and so they have to decide in less than minutes, right? So, because then they have to launch, right? They have to use that last couple minutes to launch. So they're ready for a lightning response, probably 5, 10 minutes, maybe 15, but a lot of our forces are in South Korea ready to take them out, right? So they have no time at all. We call it tightly coupled, very tightly coupled. So to understand this, why is this so heightened now? I spoke to some of you last June, I think it was, and so I'm not going to do the whole history of North Korea thing, which I just refreshed some people then, but if you recall, North Korea and South Korea have been divided, right, since the Korean War, which followed World War II, so since 1953. And since that time, the Kim dynasty has been in charge, and Kim Jong Un took over in 2011, okay? He was very young. I put this picture there because he's so young. He was probably 30 years old. We don't know his age, 29 or 30. And all other leaders in North Korea, for cultural reasons basically, are older, a lot older. And so he's an incredibly insecure leader, really insecure because of his age. Nobody trusts him. It is likely that one of the uncles he killed was going to take him out, so he was about 30, 29, 30, they thought 29 or 30, maybe 33. There's debates, but likely 29 or 30 when he took over. He's extremely insecure. So since he took over, we had a big change when his father took over. He was insecure for about a year and a half. But he was clearly going to take over for decades, and he was older, and he was ready. And so his consolidation crisis we talk about was brief. But Kim Jong Un is still having it. He just killed his half-brother last year, right? I think it was last February, 2017. He is insecure and nasty, and he's working to consolidate his power internally. So his rapid buildup of his nuclear power, which has recently become, he went from, his father exploded the first nuclear bombs that North Korea got. Just to be clear, North Korea went nuclear in 2006 fully. There are debates that it really had the capability in 1999 or 2000, but it held back from testing them or fully weaponizing, the CIA thinks, until we took out Saddam Hussein in 2003. And they got and then called North Korea part of an axis of evil in 2002, then took out Saddam Hussein as the first step in taking out the axis of evil. And they very quickly pushed to get nuclear weapons right after that. And they declared, they tried to bargain away a non-aggression pact right then with the US. And it fell apart, but they've bargained really hard for 2004 and 2005. Many people thought we still could have kept them from going nuclear. That was Colin Powell and then Condoleezza Rice. They were working very hard to keep them from going nuclear, but they weren't willing to accept the things they were insisting on. So anyway, it fell apart and they went nuclear in 2006. So this crisis is not about them going nuclear. Since that time, they built up their bombs, and the CIA thinks they have about 60 bombs now, right? They definitely have the material for 60 bombs. Whether they've weaponized all that or they could have more. Bombs, I'm going to urge you to know, are small and easy to hide. They really could have more than that. We don't know. North Korea is very mountainous. We could very easily not know all of their facilities at all. But they're poor. What this crisis is about, though, is consolidating his power. He's domestically insecure, so he's rapidly built up his bombs as show for his people that he's going to keep them safe. And he's built up his missile technology. So allegedly, what we're really upset about is that he just developed long-range missiles that could reach the US. And he just blew up hydrogen bombs last year and this year, early last year and then late last year for sure. So he claimed in 2016 we were skeptical, but by 2017 it was clear he has a hydrogen bomb. So that's a very big nuclear bomb, right? You know that that's millions of tons of TNT, not just thousands of tons of TNT, which is the size of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, okay? So Hiroshima and Nagasaki were small bombs. They take only out small cities like Eugene. But hydrogen bombs take out millions of people. And that's, 8 million dead in New York City easily type thing. Okay? So he now has hydrogen bombs. He can kill millions of people if he weaponizes them well. And there is every indication that within this year he could weaponize them just fine to be on an ICBM. Maybe not. He's poor. He could be incompetent. But he is doing great right now in terms of getting stuff done fast. He's scared. On our side, why is it heightened now? This is, on his side, it's a domestic political consolidation of his power. On our side, it's less clear exactly, other than Trump made a campaign promise that he was going to solve this thing. And he wasn't going to let North Korea threaten us. Now, what's really interesting is not let North Korea threaten us. The Soviet Union and Russia had 35,000 bombs. And we eventually ended the Cold War deciding we were safe. And China never built up past hundreds of bombs because they didn't go that way. And he's at 60 bombs and we're scared. So we're scared because of a personality rather than his strength, right? Because we're not scared of other people. And yet, Trump, one at the same time, says, we'll get you, we can get you, but yet we're scared. So I just want you to see that contradiction. Maybe it's a threat, or maybe our deterrence could hold him, right? Which clearly Trump thinks our deterrence is good enough that we don't have to be that scared yet. Anyway, President Trump promised to apply maximum pressure. So he's choosing to apply maximum pressure because he doesn't want to accept North Korea's nuclear capability or missile capability. He's not going to let them build more nukes or more missiles. He is going to stop them. That's the game. It's nothing. He argues that North Korea is looking for trouble. He said if China would help us, that'd be great. If not, we'll solve it without them. He says it's getting to be a real crisis because they just fired an ICBM, right, that worked. But they haven't put the hydrogen bomb, or probably not even an atomic bomb, on the tip of an ICBM yet. But they could have. It's all happening now. We don't know exactly when. So anyway, it's hitting this crisis point, and there's a chance that we could end up having a major, major conflict with North Korea, absolutely, this year. Inside the Trump administration, they're calling this the decisive year. This is the crisis moment. It could be an absolute showdown, and it's going to happen this year. Why? So I'm just letting you know, on our side, we're choosing to do it because we won't accept their nuclear weapons or their missiles, and so some people believe we can't accept that. But I just want to point out to you, we've accepted it with China and Russia and Pakistan, for sure. Pakistan, and so in terms of all the countries that have them, there's 9, right? France, Britain, U.S., Israel, India, Pakistan, Russia, China. Did I mention those already? Okay, I think we got them all, and North Korea. So there's 9. We have stopped that why Trump was justified in the beginning at this crisis, and is still justified, but most of our allies don't want him to go this far, was he was enforcing what is known as the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And that treaty is a treaty that outlaws everybody but the Security Council members from having nuclear weapons, okay? So there's 5 legal states who have promised to disarm someday under the NPT, and then all the others are illegal. India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel are illegal, okay? Now, North Korea says they never signed, they pulled out of that treaty, and we say they're not allowed to pull out, okay? Israel never signed, and India never signed, and Pakistan never signed, okay? So they're not illegal, they're outside the treaty. Everybody else, and at various times we called everybody else but Israel a rogue. India and Pakistan were punished somewhat, but not much, but a little bit of trade. Anyway, so North Korea signed the treaty, and for a while, they kept promising to stay within the treaty, okay? And I'm not going to go over all of that because I did that last time a bit, but I am going to say that part of that history shows ways you could eventually get back to somewhere of a path to a resolution, okay? So while Trump makes threats, he has said that he's open to talking, okay? And Tillerson has said he's open to talking. So Trump has said various things of the U.S. has been talking to North Korea and paying them extortion money for 25 years, so talking's not the answer. That, I would say, is his primary position, because he says that the most. But occasionally, on January 6th, from Camp David, he said that he's open to talking with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. Sure, I always believe in talking, but we have a very firm stance. Look, our stance, you know what it is. We're very firm, but I would be, absolutely, I would do that. I don't have a problem with that at all. So he has said recently that he would talk, okay? So I'm just saying we can't rule out that he will talk, right? Because some people have said in his administration he'll talk. They have laid out no clear plan for talking. Historically, we did have an agreement with North Korea. North Korea had signed the NPT and then cheated, and then there was a crisis in 1994, and they decided they were going to pull out, and Jimmy Carter rushed in, kind of in a very wild way, but you know, it was actually good ultimately, but Clinton didn't like it at first, which was kind of interesting. But Jimmy Carter rushed in because he knew Kim Il-sung, and he arranged for talks that ended up being the high point of relations, called the Agreed Framework, 1994 to 2002. You will notice, I put this up here, North Korea missile launches and nuclear tests, 1994 to 2002. They're almost non-existent, okay? They had one intermediate range missile test, okay? Isn't that amazing? So they had an agreed framework. It was an uneasy thing where they were arguing that they would denuclearize in exchange for normalization and aid, foreign aid. And so both sides didn't deliver well ever, but most experts agree that the U.S. and South Korea and Japan, who were delivering the aid, delivered even less, okay? So, but you can study it and decide. Both, it was a tit-for-tat thing where we never would deliver the fuel oil on time, and we'd never deliver the light water reactor we had promised to help them keep the lights on. You famously have probably seen the pictures that North Korea is dark at night while South Korea has lights. They don't have enough oil. They don't have enough electricity. So they're looking for power. And so we were supposed to be sending them fuel oil to keep the lights on. And we were always late, and the aid was late. And so they would do things, clear extortion things of starting to test and bother us. And then we'd do something back to make it work again, but then we'd hold off and they'd do something. And so then we could say they were cheating, they could say we were cheating. Anyway, by 2002, it fell apart. Remember why? They were part of the axis of evil. It totally collapsed when they were shocked, actually, when George Bush Jr. had said, Kim Il-sung's a bad guy, I'm going to have to take him out a few times, but they didn't take it that seriously. They kept hoping for more talks, but then when they were put into the axis of evil speech, most experts say that was it. They got very scared that they were going to be taken out. So then, after that, there was a series of talks that didn't go as well, but they were led by China, 6-party talks, where all parties would go to China and talk. And they were actually very interestingly productive some of the time, even though the hostility was really heightened during the U.S. attack on Iraq and the threat that implied to North Korea. I was very skeptical that they'd get anywhere, but only in retrospect and studying what Condoleezza Rice said about it made me realize how close they really were. I had no idea. At the time, I think I taught it as, this'll never work, right? But she was a believer, and so was Colin Powell. It's very interesting how close they got to denuclearizing even after they went nuclear. I urge you to look at that. It's interesting, because I thought, no way, right? The overall atmosphere was really bad. So that gives you hope that it could go back there, because they actually, if their security was guaranteed by China and we agreed to back off, that would be a new game, very new game, okay? Things fell apart under Obama, partially because South Korea elected a hardline government. And if South Korea is not going to be willing to be a partner, all bets are off. Partly because Obama, hands were tied by a Republican Congress, if you'll remember. He kept throwing out that he might talk, and it kept being ridiculed for it. So he ended up doing a very hardline policy on North Korea, but a low-key one, where he was trying not to provoke North Korea, right? If you'll remember, he would often refuse to respond, right? Because he didn't want to play the tit-for-tat game, which is kind of interesting. But he pushed behind the scenes and constantly for more international sanctions, which a lot of us knew happened some, but it happened a lot. He covertly sabotaged North Korea's missiles. He did cyber warfare on them, and they did cyber warfare on us. He provided defense systems to North Korea's neighbors. He started all the selling of missile defense to the neighbors, which is incredibly problematic, as I'm going to explain. And he called on China's leaders to do more. So most people are calling Trump's current policy strategic patience plus tweets, right? Same policy, Obama's policy, but with a lot of conversation so far. So, what are the current possibilities? Kim Jong Un, I just give you a quote from him, he constantly says, as I've mentioned, that he's seen what's happened in the past, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, right? And he is gonna survive. I put that out there as his quote, his viewpoint, his main thing that he keeps coming back to. So, in my opinion, he will not denuclearize anytime soon. And he will keep building missiles because he feels like he has to. I think it's for domestic reasons and for real threat reasons at this point. Will Trump accept this? I don't see it. That's why I'm scared. how would he accept this? I don't see that man as backing down on anything. I don't know. Our best hope right now is that South Korea and North Korea are talking, and they're only talking about doing the Olympics together. There is no talk about nuclear stuff, because that's off the table as far as North Korea feels at this point, until the US quits threatening them from their point. The other big thing, Tillerson says, is the big hope is Tillerson. He keeps saying occasionally that he'll talk until the first bomb drops, redoubling our diplomatic efforts to defuse the threat of a nuclear showdown, and we're ready to have the first meeting without precondition. That's something we haven't seen and almost never saw under Bush Jr. There were always preconditions. What does that mean? You'll hear that word precondition. We will only talk to you until you have quit building missiles. We will only talk to you until X. You have to do something first without us doing anything. Got it? So that is starting the talk, like not talking to figure out where you're going, but you have to do something major first. That's what the preconditions are all about. If you hear preconditions, these are really serious conditions that you have to meet before we talk. So, but Tillerson said, let's just meet. We could talk about the weather if you want. We could talk about whether it's going to be a square table or a round table, if that's what you're excited about. But we can at least sit down and see each other face to face. When I read that, I was like, wow, there is hope. That's interesting, right? We'll see. Tillerson might be on his way out, as we all know. I don't know. I don't think so, but who knows? You know, I don't know. This is a very, very hard to predict. All of our political science theories are problematic in this case. We don't do well with individual level theories. Those are in the realm of psychology, and then we break things out into state theories and system theories, and those are much more predictable. Anyway. So now I'm going to turn to explaining something about the immediate crisis is that North Korea is building better and better missiles. This is what's bringing it to a head for the US, right? North Korea is now able to hit anywhere in the US. I don't know if you watch late night TV, but they love to mock this, that now that they can reach Washington, this has become a crisis. Yeah, well, it is become a crisis for some people because they can reach Washington. I like to emphasize to my students they always could reach Washington, because if you can reach Washington with marijuana bales, you can reach Washington with a nuclear weapon, okay? They are small and easy to hide. The CIA has said that forever. Why would any rogue state build a missile? They will immediately be killed. Of course, they will deliver it through covert means. The CIA has predicted over and over again, no rogue states would bother to build a missile. That's why others don't bother. They would deliver it through covert means so that they could get away with using it without launching it as a missile. The missile thing is for domestic political effect and to show off to sell missiles. Missiles, as I told you, is their big export. So they like to prove they've got this missile technology and they'll sell it to anybody. We call them the Kmart of missile technology. They like to sell it. Anybody wants to buy it. Otherwise, other missile powers have a missile technology control regime that limits who you can sell technology to. But once North Korea gets their hands on it, they sell it to anybody, okay? So anyway, I'm show you this, that they have lots of missiles. And these aren't all theirs, but these are ones they have built off of. They are theirs, but they borrowed Russian missiles, and then these are the North Korean missiles. And so now they're in the 8,000-mile range, right? So that means ICBMs can come around the Earth in 30 minutes, right? That's a very fast-flying thing that is going 16,000 miles an hour, okay? That's very fast and very, you can't defend against it. So they haven't gotten good at that yet. They just got there. They just got missile technology is much harder than making a nuclear bomb. A nuclear bomb is 1945 technology, and it took the U.S. and Russia a great effort to get missiles by the 60s, right? Sputnik was the beginning of it in 1957, but good missiles took a while, and it was a lot of testing and a lot of work. So this is hard, and most countries can't do it. Iran can't do it, right? They're buying their stuff from North Korea. So a lot of people are wondering, is Trump using the madman strategy? Is he bluffing, right? He says he has military options, and some of his leaders, at first his military leaders, very interestingly, said, no good military options. They quickly said, not really, not good ones. And then they got called to task for it or got told they better come up with some. So now they're saying they have some. They have good military options. In fact, they've said some weird quotes of, we have 7 good military options, things like that sound really precise, right? They don't tell you, because you can't talk about this stuff, but we can imagine what those military options might be, okay? Because we know what they have and what we have. The Team Trump, this is from the Economist article today that I urge you to read. They say they're pondering whether they're bluffing, and they go through all the evidence today of all the people who are out there saying, no, we've got good military options. This is the stuff that really knocks your socks off. They're going to great pains to explain why the boss is not bluffing, why in 2018, in the words of one senior administration, is a very dangerous year. We're going to do it. We're going to do it. And they have lots and lots of discussion and chatter. And this is the kind of chatter, I would argue, a lot of us heard in 2002, before many people in the public even knew that, before it went public, that we were going to go for a war. Okay, a lot of us knew war was coming in 2002 because I don't know if you know, we pulled a lot of military out of Afghanistan, started sending it to Iraq before we even started to do a buildup in the fall of 2002, right? But all year, a lot of us were saying, there's chatter, there's coming, this is happening, they're going to roll it out, etc. So even Defense Secretary James Mattis, this is how The Economist describes him, a cerebral former Marine general who says his job is to buy time for our diplomats, and who originally said there were no good military options, okay, he stated that early on, to solve the North Korean crisis, has weighed in. Put on the spot by reporters in September 2017, he insisted that there are military options that would not imperil Seoul, because people say, yeah, the US could attack them really hard, but immediately they'll destroy Seoul, because they're aiming everything at Seoul as they're holding hostage South Korea, right? The capital of South Korea is very close. They have everything targeted on it. They're really ready to eliminate all of Seoul. That's why South Korea is talking. That's why South Korea is saying, yes, join our Olympic team. Let's talk. This is not fun. The South Korean capital, though its 10 million inhabitants live within range of North's artillery and missiles, such options exist, he said, but I will not go into detail. So they won't explain the details, but the Pentagon recently put out the official line, so Team Trump is saying we have military options, but in November 2017, the Pentagon stated that the only way to locate and destroy with complete certainty all components of North Korea's nuclear program is through a ground invasion. We assess North Korea may consider the use of biological weapons as an option. Note, they also added the Kim regime could respond to any kind of U.S.-South Korean military activity through a variety of conventional and unconventional means, any use of which could escalate into a full-scale war on the Korean Peninsula. A possibility also exists that the conflict with North Korea could escalate into a nuclear war, the result of which could be radioactive contamination. It goes on and on, but this is the Pentagon's assessment, that they know it could escalate, and it could escalate immediately, okay? Why? To take out all their facilities in a preemptive strike is a whole bunch. So I give you this map of all their facilities, okay? And then I show you what they're hidden in. Mountains. It's a bit hilly. And when you put all your nuclear stuff inside this kind of terrain in caves, it's hard to get, right? It's really hard to get. That's why we call nuclear weapons the ultimate weapon. They're small and easy to hide and impossible to eliminate. You can't go first and win. You're not even against North Korea, okay? Just so you know, adults see the problem. It's not pretty. South Korea sees the problem. China can't believe it. I don't think anybody really believes it, but the question is, does Trump believe it, right? Is he being bluffing, or does he believe it? Does he think it wouldn't be so bad? We don't know. We have seen leaders who believed it, and that's why people are likening it to World War I more than the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay? because World War I was caused by leaders who went back and forth not believing in their offensive plans and then believing in it, and then ultimately in the critical midnight hour they believed, and then they took it back the day later, but it was too late. So I'm just saying, this idea, do I believe or not believe? Can I get away with it or not? Can I thread the needle? That's why we liken it. You're seeing people liken this to 1914 more than the Cuban Missile Crisis, because the leaders who ultimately went in 1914 believed in the midnight at 2 a.m. I can show you the time, hours they believed. The German leadership, when they launched it, the military probably restrained the civilian leaders and said, go. Anyway, that's the feeling on that. So the key to solving this is, does Trump believe, and could China get scared enough to help solve this? The problem is, because China could help solve this, they don't hold all the cards. North Korea is not a province of China. They can't control North Korea as much as we pretend they can. That's like us controlling Mexico, okay? Not impossible, but it would be, we'd rather build a wall than control Mexico, right? That's like, it's hard work. And so far, China has tried to build a wall with North Korea. They put up big fences, they have a lot of guards, they don't want a lot of refugees. I mean, it's really similar. They have a poor, failing state on their border, and they don't want to rescue it. They'd rather build a wall. And that's how they feel about North Korea. They also, see where North Korea is relative to China, just remember, they don't want South Korea to own North Korea and share a border with China. So they would rather North Korea be their failed state than give it over to South Korea, okay? So they're not going to allow South Korea to join with North Korea. That's not in their interests. And they don't want it to fail. They don't want it to crumble. They don't want to do regime change in North Korea, because if you break it, you bought it. It's like us trying to rebuild Iraq into a democracy. It's a lot of work. They don't want to. They don't want this job. China is keeping North Korea alive as their main trading partner. There's a lot of special interests in China that like doing trade with North Korea. So they have political pressures within China to not let North Korea fall and to keep the trade going. A lot of North Korea's missile technology is known to come from China. So some people think China is actually supporting North Korea. Most experts I've seen think that it's sort of like us trying to control our military-industrial complex. They sell weapons all over the place that we can't keep track of, and they think that's what's happening. It doesn't have official sanction, but it could. Who knows? There's corruption to go around everywhere. Who knows? But I don't think China wants North Korea to be so provocative at the US. They would rather keep North Korea weak but stable, not strong but stable. So I think their interest is in them not getting, they want China to shut up and sit down. I mean, they want North Korea to shut up and sit down. They want them to behave, and they can't control them, okay? Because Kim Jong Un is so insecure domestically, he's going to do what he wants. So will China help us? I would say some, but never enough. Not enough. They'd like us to keep talking, but they don't really want to solve it in the way we want to solve it. And so I think people who scorn working with China are right. They're not going to solve it the way we want to solve it. If we insist on solving it, that they denuclearize and don't have missiles and everything, I don't think China's going there. I don't think they want to go that far. So, but they wouldn't mind if they denuclearized, but they don't want to really solve it all the way. It's very interesting. But they're really, really, really unwilling to solve it right now because of the missile defense problem. And this is the part I want to show you. The biggest problem for China, and what I've argued, but I'm getting a little more humble about arguing this, I've argued that North Korea is the poster child for missile defense. I think they are, that we've provoked them to justify building missile defense, and we wanted to build missile defense against China. I think they're also, so I've always seen them as irrelevant. We were going to build missile defense and try to bring China in with missile defense, even without North Korea, but North Korea was very useful for justifying it, okay? And so China would help us on North Korea a lot more if we agree to get rid of missile defense. But they don't even bring it up because they floated it, but they know that we're building missile defense against North Korea. really against China. So they know we're not going to really negotiate that. So they're not going to really negotiate with us because they don't like the missile defense. Very interestingly, last year they said to South Korea, they used to say, if you put missile defense in your country, we're going to punish you. But right now, China is trying to pull all allies away from us. And so they told South Korea, go ahead, put missile defense there. We'll still talk to you. That was really different, really interesting, because they think that South Korea is going to want to get along with China and North Korea more than us to avoid nuclear war with North Korea. So they see it a strategic opportunity to side up with South Korea and ignore missile defense until they're good friends. I think that's very interesting. Okay, so the first problem with missile defense is that Trump allegedly believes in missile defense. This is what's really interesting. He said that our missile defense works. I don't know if did other people notice this? He said, he said this on Sunday morning talk show, I think, or somebody, to Sean Hannity or somebody, on a talk show. He explained, we have missiles that can knock out a missile in the air 97% of the time, and if you send two of them, it's going to get knocked out. Okay, so he thinks our missile defense somehow works at 97% reliability, okay? This is just simply not true. Not true, not true, not true, okay? We have taken this statement apart to try to figure out how he got it, but we know pretty much how he got it because a lot of weird statements are made about missile defense capabilities in front of Congress in order to justify more funding. So if you go through the talking points of the missile defense in front of Congress, it says, wow, we're doing a lot, okay? So if you, it was explained to Congress, if you assume that you had 4 interceptors against a single incoming ICBM, and one of those interceptors could possibly get a missile 57% of the time, and I'm going to explain that 57%, they like to round up to 60% of the time we could get it with an interceptor. The odds of a successful intercept scenario rise to 97% if you use 4 of them. But that's if you assume all 4 of those don't have the same problem, right? But if they're working on the same radars, they likely have the same problem, okay? Or if they have a faulty kill vehicle, which they do, they likely have the same problem. Or similar problems, or at least 2 of them have the problem. So there's no way you get to 97% most likely, because they're not independent of each other, okay? They'd have to be fully independent of each other, perhaps different systems, okay? What we have now is a single system called the ground-based mid-course defense system that has a 60% kill rate, sort of. It's been tested 18 times, and 10 of those times it allegedly worked, but a bunch of those 10 times it had help. It had beepers on it. It had beep, 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 you can see me, here I am, because they were successful proto-tests, but they like to round up and say 10 out of 18 were successes, but at the time they admitted these were just crawl before you can walk tests. They are totally rigged. They just test a little part of the system. So they're not real tests. We've only done 2 real tests, and both of those were failed. So I think Kim Jong Un even said, if it's, he launched some missiles. He launched 4 at a time at one point, basically in response to something on missile defense, because we know, it's well known, that if we had multiple missiles at the same time, it could easily overwhelm our radars and our ability to track, because it's very rudimentary what we're trying to do so far. And he's ridiculed that all our tests are in daylight at 10 a.m. and we know when and where they're coming from. And so he said, what if I launch them at night and things like that, because he ridicules us as we ridicule him. So I think I'm just saying all of our missile defense systems don't work, and I can explain all the reasons why they might never work, probably will never work. Most scientists argue they will never work for ICBMs. But yet, we have a lot of people in the public and Trump saying, look, so here's a cartoon that says, here's our Trump card, this is Kim Jong Un, and then he says, oh no, we've got missile defense, oh dear. Well, if it's an ICBM, first of all, this THAAD system, does anybody know THAAD? Will it work against an ICBM? Nope. It's not even aimed at it, right? So each system goes after different types of missiles, short range, medium range, intermediate range, or long range. And so the THAAD is for medium range missiles, eventually intermediate, and maybe someday long range, but not where it's deployed and not at this time. So it's not even poised to defend against a missile aimed at the US. Our ground-based system that we have in Alaska and California has 33 interceptors, so it could be overwhelmed with multiple missiles quite easily, right? And that's the one that's had 10 out of 18, maybe 57% success. Anyway, everything's rudimentary and flawed, and I'm going to show you. It was very interesting to watch this high alert recently in Hawaii, right? People going into shelters. That's bizarre, right? Really bizarre, because if they really were going to hit you, you just might as well not bother us. I hope you know. But if you were in a different state, I tell my students, yeah, sure, if you're in Oregon and it hits California, it's definitely helpful to stay inside when radiation's out somewhere in the atmosphere, but not if they're aiming it at Hawaii and going to hit Hawaii. It's not going to be helpful. So I just wanted to show you, and how long am I on time? Okay, I better quit. I have a video here. The New York Times has put a bunch of missile defense videos up recently, which I think is wild. They haven't discussed this since 2000, and I have one here to show you that if you're interested, I'll show you in a minute. But they explain how very hard it is, okay? So we don't have perfect air defenses, and planes fly at about 400 to 600 miles an hour, right? And some go much faster than that, obviously. But we don't have perfect air defenses, even at thousands of miles an hour. And as I said, long-range missiles go 16,000 miles an hour, and they're tinier, and so they're very hard to hit. So what we would do, they would launch a missile. It could, as it got into the outer atmosphere, release a bunch of decoys. And so for most of its trajectory, it could easily be overwhelmed by very cheap Mylar balloons that we couldn't hit. This is why most scientists think we shouldn't bother, because the decoys for out of 30 minutes, 26 minutes, you really can't hit it because of the decoy problem, okay? So that's why most of them think this is why we had an ABM treaty that outlawed it, is because it was scientifically impossible. That was in the 70s, okay? For this reason, the decoy reason. But we brought it back because it was fun to build. So it takes ground-based radars, but of course they can't see over the edge, so you need satellite sensors, you need some C-band radar. You got to really triangulate to try to find this thing as it goes really fast. And then, in order not to mess up the atmosphere, you have to hit it with a hit-to-kill vehicle, a small kinetic hit to blow it apart, because anything bigger wrecks all kinds of stuff. You can't hit it. We thought about blowing up bombs to get them. It doesn't work. Anyway, a hit-to-kill vehicle is hitting a bullet with a bullet at 16,000 miles an hour. And that's tricky. And these bullets, by anybody who's good, can maneuver them, right? So, and you could have multiple of them, which is MIRVing. If you're the old guard, you'll remember that. So this is a very silly game. Anyway, my final thing. The better approach is to abolish nuclear weapons. But I'm going to explain really quickly what I want you to debate here. This is one thing I want you to think about. There are two very clear reasons to abolish nuclear weapons, really clear reasons, okay? The first and primary one is that nuclear weapons are immoral. That's what the ICAN Treaty is about. That's true. That's a fact that they're weapons of genocide. They're disgusting, okay? They're also ridiculous. They're unthinkable. They're profoundly inhumane and absurd. And it's very interesting that we can outlaw chemical weapons and we can outlaw biological weapons, but we can't do nukes, the Trump card, right? So we don't like other WMD. But we got a treaty, just the US isn't part of it. So this is the ICAN Treaty we're all celebrating. Huge Nobel Peace Prize for the ICAN Treaty that 122 states have signed to abolish nuclear weapons, okay? But I want you to ponder this. Some people arguing to abolish nuclear weapons want us to reject deterrence, to say deterrence is immoral, it's not proven. You're going to see this a lot in the press, okay? And this could all be true. But there is another approach, and I see the peace community sort of divided, and I think they should come together on this, okay? Because there is not a person in the peace community I don't love and respect absolutely, completely, and we should all work together. But these go together, okay? Abolishing nuclear weapons is also strategically smart. Why? Okay? And we learned this at the end of the Cold War. It's strategically smart not to commit suicide, okay? If you get rid of all of them, you are safe from accidental launch and from terrorism, okay? And that's why I teach my class called Terrorism and WMD, and I taught it for 10 years in the Cold War of WMD and terrorism, and then 9/11 happened and I switched the name to Terrorism and WMD. But we've been working on this problem of stealing single bombs and blowing up cities since the end of the Cold War. We didn't even think about it during the Cold War because we had Holocaust with the missiles, right? But what the world, even the right wing and the left wing, McCain and Obama, both after 9/11 in 2009, they were both campaigning on getting rid of all nuclear weapons. That's a very interesting fact. Okay? The Hoover Institute and Harvard and everybody else agree we should get rid of all weapons. But what the arms control community argues, A, because it's immoral, they don't disagree with that, but they also say, essentially, you would go to a world of virtual deterrence, meaning we all know nuclear weapons are small and easy to hide, and we can't really get rid of all of them, but it'd be great if we could inspect everybody, like the gold standard in Iran, where we feel very sure. We have a nuclear agreement with Iran with 24/7 inspections of all their sites, and the world feels like we do know they're not having nukes. We could do this. This has been done. And it only happened because we went into Iraq and found no WMD and proved inspections work, just so you know. Okay? So we would go to a world where we know great powers could rebuild these things, but if nobody had any in being, then nobody could have them stolen. Okay? And this takes a diplomatic arrangement, an arms control arrangement, but it's also smart. And so Henry Kissinger's working on this project, just so you know, along with Bill Perry, who's working with him in the Gang of Four and is everywhere on the press. And that's what they see, is you want to go to virtual deterrence, but it is going to zero. Global Zero is working on it, and ICANN's working on it. But this relies underneath that, well, it's dumb to have them because we all could rebuild instantly, so we are deterred. So war's outlawed, basically, forever because of deterrence. It makes no sense at all, okay? But you have to know what you're doing, and you have to think it through. Anyway, I just throw that out there as those are the different positions on going to zero, but they both go to zero. And I think they work together, so you shouldn't see them as different. The argument is whether deterrence, you reject it, or you just say, it's out there, but war's gone, because we are all deterred by the thought of having a nuclear weapon, because it makes no sense. Because if anybody attacks us, we will nuke them. It might not be tomorrow if we don't have nukes, but it will be within days. As I've told, I gave this talk once in Corvallis, and I said, well, Eugene can't build one within days, but Corvallis can, right? And they all said, yep. Okay, anyway, anywhere you have a research reactor, you can build a nuke if you're any good. Okay, that's all. Thank you.